Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Gopi Dervalia, and on the day of semester 4 presentation on comparative literature and translation studies, I and Hetal Patak are going to give a presentation on Susan Bassnett's book, Comparative Literature, A Critical Introduction, published in 1993. So, there is one chapter that what is comparative literature today. So, we are going to deal with this topic in our presentation, that what is comparative literature today by Susan Bassnett. Okay, so who is Susan Bassnett? So Susan Bassnett is a prominent scholar of the field of comparative literature, and she is a British academic and translator. She also her works are deals into the issues of languages, identity, and also power dynamics in the context of global literature. These are the topics of our presentation. Throughout our presentation, we will dealing with these topics. Okay, abstract of this article. So this slide describes that Susan Bassnett's view on comparative literature. It's not just about comparing. Western books anymore, but about embracing stories from all over the world, and understanding how they connect. And in the 1990s, a new way of studying and reading literature emerged, and focusing on gender and how people uh, 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 receive stories, etc. So Bassnett also thinks that digital tools can also help us research and share these stories in new ways. Okay, so these are the key points of Susan Bassnett's article. Uh, Comparative literature is not just about comparing things, but it's about understanding the interconnectedness of stories and cultures. So in short, comparative literature means celebrating connections between stories from different cultures and times, and enriching our understanding of the world through the literature. Okay, so these are the key arguments of the article written by Susan Bassnett. So, interdisciplinarity and connection beyond national and world literature, textual focus and comparison as methodology, accessibility and reader engagement, a dynamic and evolving field. So, these two slides are describes that. Bassnett's article underscored the essence of comparative literature by emphasizing its focus on understanding the relationships and connections between diverse literature. Of the world, and unlike a national literature that centers on a single nation's output, while comparative literature explores the cross-cultural exchange of ideas and themes. Okay, so furthermore, Susan Bassnett also highlights the dynamic nature of the field, like emerging technologies and the reality of the global societies. Okay, so these are the analysis of Susan Bassnett arguments by Susan Bassnett. So, comparative literature, as described by Susan Bassnett, involves studying text across different cultures, emphasizing its interdisciplinarity, nature, and focus on cultures, emphasizing its interdisciplinarity on connections in its connection in literature across time and space. So this journey is reminiscent by of Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold's idea that everywhere there is connection, everywhere there is illustration. No single event, no single literature is adequately comprehended except in relation to other events, to other literatures. So there is a reference of Goethe, and Goethe coined the term world literature to comparative literature. In the postmodern era, critics still grapple with questions that defining the object of a study in a comparative literature, and also the nature of the comparative canon, etc. So the persistent debate, often referred to as the crisis of comparative literature. So these enduring questions reflects the ongoing challenges within the uh, field. So there is also reference of Benedetto Croce. In 1903, Croce rejected the idea of cultural literature as a distinct discipline, considering the non-subject. Considering the field of non-subject, and Croce also believed that understanding literature required a comprehensive exploration of works within their broader historical context. Okay, so now I would like to call Hetal Pathak for further discussion. Thank you.
Okay, very good noon to you all. And now I am continuing with Susan Bassnett's article, What is Comparative Literature Today and How It Came into Being. So basically, this article is about basically this article is about that how what is the exact definition of comparative literature, and how Susan Bassnett's view about comparative literature has undergone of a change over the time or period. So that is how first as the definition of comparative literature, Gopi mentioned that it is not about comparing text, but rather it is about the text across cultures, which defines the patterns and actions, and also about the time and space. And while we are discussing about the comparative literature, we can say that people often come to study comparative literature from different paths and from different perspective, as some wants to explore beyond the limits of a single text, while other wants to explore while others are intrigued by the similarities between text or authors from different cultures. For example, when we read any books, we often encounter the references from different authors and works from two different cultures, and that is why it may lead to the national curiosity and the interest in the field of comparative literature. So now I will discuss the analysis of arguments. In that, first I will discuss Benedetto Croce's argument that the term comparative literature was disguising the obvious, that is the fact that the true object of study was literary history. Considering the pronouncements of comparative literature made by scholars such as Max Koch, founder and editor of the two German comparative journals, Benedetto Croce claimed that he could not distinguish between literary history pure and simple comparative literary history. So basically, Benedetto Croce is a scholar from 1903, and according to him, he argued that comparative literature was not a separate discipline, and the object of a study should be literary history rather than comparative literature. And he says that it is about it is more about literary history rather than putting emphasis on comparative literature, and how people are narrow minded in their own experiences. So that is the argument made by Benedetto Croce. But other scholars made grandiose claims that for comparative literature, Charles Mills Gale, one of the founders of North American comparative literature, proclaimed in the same year as Croce's attack that the working premise of the student of comparative literature was literature as a distinct and integral medium of thought, a common institutional expression of humanity, differentiated, to be sure, by the social conditions of the individual, by the racial, historical, cultural, and linguistic influences, opportunities, and restrictions, but irrespective of age or guise, prompted by the common needs and aspirations of man, sprung from common faculties, psychological and physiological, and obeying common laws of material and mode of the individual and social humanity. So that is how another scholar is a professor, Charles Miss Gale, and he argued that comparative literature is more about which transcends the boundaries of history, culture, and thought. And through literature, people can share and explore the thoughts from different cultures. Remarkably, similar sentiments to those expressed in 1974 by Francois Jost when he claimed that national literature cannot constitute an intelligible field of study because of its arbitrarily limited perspective, that comparative literature represents more than an academic discipline. It is an overall view of literature, of the world of letters, a humanistic ecology, a literature, a vision of the cultural universe, inclusive and comprehensive. So that is the argument made by him. And he is the French author, and he says that how comparative literature represents something which is more than an academic discipline. Yet, even as the process was underway in the West, comparative literature began to gain ground in the rest of the world. New programs in comparative literature began to emerge in China, in Taiwan, in Japan, and other Asian countries, based, however, not on only ideal of universalism, but on the very aspect of literary study that many Western comparists had sought to deny the specificity of national literatures, as Swapan Majumdar puts it. It is because of this predilection for national literature, much deplored by the Anglo-American critics as a methodology, that comparative literature has struck roots in the third world nations and in India particular. So that is how Swapan Majmudar says that all have root in one tradition, and what you say is national boundaries is not actually national boundaries. So that is how he proves her point with saying that the emergence of comparative literature in the third world countries. Further, Homi Bhabha sums up the new emphasis in an essay discussing the ambivalence of post-colonial culture, suggesting that instead of cross-referencing, there is an effective, productive cross-cutting across sides of social significance that erases the dialectical, disciplinary sense of cultural references and relevance. So, Homi K. Bhabha is a post-colonial critic, and that is how he make his point in the field of comparative studies. Wole Soyinka and a whole range of African critics have exposed the pervasive influence of Hegel, who argued that African culture was weak in contrast to what he claimed were higher, more developed cultures, and who effectively denied Africa a history. James Sneed, in an essay attacking Hegel, points out that the outstanding fact of late 20th century European culture is its ongoing reconciliation with black culture. The mystery may be that it took so long to discern the elements of black culture already there in latent form, and to realize that the separation between the cultures was perhaps all along not one of nature but one of force. So through this point we can understand that everyone, majority believed that African culture was weak in contrast to what he claimed. But Wale Soyinka makes his point clear by putting the point that it is not like that African culture was weak, but perhaps all along not one of nature but one of force. Another critic, Terry Eagleton, has argued that literature, in the meaning of the word we have inherited, is an ideology, and he discusses the way in which the emergence of English language as an academic subject in the 19th century had quite clear political implications. The establishment of the subject in the universities, he maintains, followed the vast social changes brought about in the aftermath of the First World War. The Great War, with its carnage of ruling class rhetoric, but paid to some of the more strident forms of uh, chauvinism on which English had previously thrived. English literature rode to power on the back of wartime nationalism, but it also represented a search for spiritual solutions on the part of the English ruling class, whose sense of identity had been profoundly shaken. Literature would be at once solace and reformation, a familiar ground on which Englishmen could regroup both to explore and to find some alternative to the nightmare of history. So, with this point made by Terry Eagleton, yes, we can say that Terry Eagleton has argued that literature, in the traditional senses of the word, is an ideology. He discusses how the emergencies of English language as an academic subject in the 19th century had clear political implications. According to Eagleton, the establishment of the subject in universities followed the major social changes that occurred after the First World War. English literature rode to power on the back of wartime nationalism, but it also represented a search for spiritual solutions on the part of the English ruling class, whose sense of identity had been profoundly shaken. Ganesh Devya's argument that comparative literature in India coincides with the rise of modern Indian nationalism is important because it serves to remind us of the origins of the term comparative literature in Europe, a term that first appeared in an age of national struggles when new boundaries were being erected and the whole question of national culture and national identity was under discussion throughout Europe and the expanding United States of America. So, here we can see that yes, Ganesh Devya has adding something in comparative literature with the help of nationalism. David Damrosch published his book What is World Literature, in which he not only emphasizes the intervention of comparative literature but also elaborates the unique role played by the translation, as Gopi mentioned in the earlier slides. The translation is another important key theme in this article by Susan Bassnett, and the translation and comparative literature are going parallel or side by side. According to Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, comparative literature and area studies can work together in the fostering not only of national literatures of the global south but also of the writing. China Academic Journal, electronic publishing house, countless indigenous languages in the world that are programmed to vanish when the maps were made, then there is nothing necessarily new about the comparative literature. Nonetheless, I must acknowledge that the times determine how the necessary vision of comparativity will play out. comparative literature must always cross borders. So that is the point made by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, that comparative literature always must cross the borders. And in the introduction also we have seen that comparative literature is something which is which is about the cross cultural texts, and it studies the patterns and actions. Okay, towards the conclusion, comparative literature is not a single discipline but rather a complex and contested field. There are many different ways to define comparative literature, and the field has been influenced by a variety of different theoretical and methodological approaches. Comparative literature has a long and rich history dating back to the early 19th century. In the 20th century, comparative literature became more focused on the study of literary texts from different cultures, and it also began to incorporate insights from other disciplines such as anthropology, sociology, linguistics, and as well as we can connect it with gender study, media studies, film studies, and many others. In recent years, comparative literature has been influenced by post structuralist and post colonial theory, which has led to a greater focus on the politics of representation and the role of literature in the construction of cultural identity. Comparative literature is now more diverse and open ended than ever before, and it has the potential to provide new insights into the world around us. These are the references that we have used in the presentation, and yes, now you can ask me questions.
So, Hetal, as you have mentioned in your slides about the cross-cultural and interdisciplinary relations of comparative literatures, so according to Susan Bassnett, how does the time and space contribute to the dynamics of comparative studies?
Okay. Yes. According to Susan Bassnett, comparative literature or comparative studies is not about only comparing one text with the another text, but it's also about the studies of different cultures, and in that we can connect it with the time and space. And if we look at it from the perspective of text across cultures and the time and space, we can see many examples of literary texts as well as movies, that how we can connect the study of comparative literature with the actions of time and space, and how these changes has gone under the period. So that is how we can compare. Thank you.
Gopi, what challenges and opportunities does the Bassnett discuss in relations to comparative literature today?
Okay, so Susan Bassnett in her article explores challenges like cultural biases within comparative literature, and she also present in her articles of opportunities like. She also present opportunities of enriching the literary studies through cross-cultural comprehensions, and embracing the diversity of global literature. So we can say that Susan Bassnett describe both opportunities and challenges in her articles. Thank you.